You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I'm Dustin and Tony is with me, and we are here to discuss everything from August 5th through the 11th. We have a bunch of news. There is a ton of big things that happen in the news, specifically related to Hulu, Disney Plus, and Hbo Max. So we're going to get into that stuff, as well as obviously the other streaming services that have had news over the past week. So let's start off with Netflix. First up, Kings of America is a limited series that is heading to Netflix. This is going to have Amy Adams attached, along with Adam McKay directing. And then we have Netflix is going to be adapting the podcast 36 Questions. There's an Untitled Chapter film, which I'm sure I said that word wrong, film that's also landed at Netflix, and then Netflix has ordered a kids' eco-fable series. We have nothing for Prime Video. Hulu has given 2 straight-to-series orders, one starring Ellie Fanning, who's also starring in The Great, and then Hulu has announced a reduced annual subscription plan. Now, this is specifically for people who are already existing Hulu customers or subscribers, but only subscribe to the ad-supported plan. So that's the plan that's $5.99 per month. The reduced plan is you can pay $59.99 per year for an entire year's worth of service, but it is only for the ad-supported, and it's only if you're an existing subscriber as of right now.
I think this is a great promotional. It reminds me a lot of what Disney did when Disney Plus first started. It offered an annual subscription to the service at a pretty good cost. I think HBO Max has done a similar thing as well. So overall, this is really cool, and I look forward to taking advantage of that. I guess my one caveat, my one question and concern is that going forward, I know I've personally had some issues trying to get different add-ons on top of the Hulu service, like Live TV or HBO Max, and due to the bundle that I had before. So I'm just curious how adding add-ons will work. Like, will you pay the upfront annualized cost and then per month pay the monthly charges for the add-ons? Or are you even allowed to have different add-ons going on? Or is it just for the Hulu straight service with no add-ons? So those are the few questions and the concerns I have. Whereas if you're going to look forward and maybe investigate and maybe opt into this annual program subscription plan, look into that. If you're interested in any of those add-ons, you might want to keep your eye out for that. But otherwise, it seems like a great plan, and I really like streaming services, or really any type of subscription service that offers an annual plan. When you know that you're going to upfront use it a lot, you can save money long term. And this is also great for Hulu because they're able to raise large sums of money really quick, because everybody's going to be paying a larger kind of deposit and kind of at one time. So Hulu can get a lot of cash at one moment. Yeah, of course, like spreading out those payments would be nice on the balance sheet, but sometimes you need to raise capital at certain moments. So maybe that there's something else going behind where they kind of want to raise capital real quick. But overall, this is great for the consumer. This is great for Hulu, and this is a good sign going forward.
All right. Moving on to CBS All Access. Viacom CBS streaming subscribers have grown to 16.2 million. Now, if you remember correctly, they're not specifically giving only numbers for CBS All Access. They're specifically giving numbers for all of their streaming services, which also includes Showtime. Pluto TV is out there too, but not part of those numbers. But 16.2 million is a significant number. It also shows that they're continuing to grow. That's the biggest thing. Pluto TV, which is their free service that they offer, is also growing at an exponential rate. A lot of that has to do with the current environment and people looking for free content. As we've discussed many times in the past, the amount of content that you can consume for free, people have no problem consuming content with ads if it's an option. As the free services like Pluto, like Zumo, like Tubi, all of these services, they continue to grow by leaps and bounds every single quarter.
It does show that there is healthy interest in Viacom, CBS, all of their properties. Do I wish the numbers were broken down a little bit more based on which products were growing? Yes, but I think we can collectively reason that things are looking up for CBS, and I'm happy about that because I feel like they're one of the upstarts that actually has a viable base to grow for into the future, but then also kind of having the right strategy, moving forward slowly, developing products. And, they did CBS All Access, and now they're like, you know what, we need to aim a little bit bigger. So it's cool for me to see them moving that way. I don't know how you feel, Dustin, but I felt like reading this deadline report was actually kind of nice because things were broken down pretty relatively easy, talking about revenue and how that dipped 12%, talked about how licensing revenue was flat, talked about how theatric revenue was basically immaterial in the quarter because there were no films going on. They talked about home entertainment revenue rose because of different things hitting the home theater, the home release, talking about ad revenue and how ad revenue dipped 12%. So that's kind of interesting how the consolidated ad revenue dipped 12% to $6.2 billion. So overall, I think it was kind of cool to see a report broke it down so well, and to see how for streaming service, yes, it's Viacom CBS. They're not one of the main players in this space, but seeing how that they're approaching their numbers and breaking it down. I just, as someone who reads these reports all day long, it was nice to see what is important for CBS and for its investors and stakeholders in moving forward. I thought it was really cool just to see those lines of business because we don't always have that visibility into some other companies as the CBS report is.
All right, some more CBS All Access. There has been more details revealed for Viacom CBS's new service. Now, I want to specifically talk about this for a brief moment because the headline that we're linking is specifically talking about the international version of the service that eventually will launch. And it specifically says that they have every intention to launch the international service in Australia and Latin America in early 2021, which is in line with the time frame when it should be arriving here in the United States as well. But it also says that internationally it will be the place to premiere Showtime originals, which is interesting because there was an article, I want to say, I'm not sure if we attached this or talked about it, but maybe it was something I just read. But I know it was on Deadline at some point in the last couple of weeks. But specifically, they made a comment about how they had no intention of having Showtime get absorbed into this new service. Here in the States, they'll have Showtime as potentially an add-on for the service, but it would not just be included with the subscription. And I think that's specifically because they don't want to run into a situation like HBO Max where the service gets too expensive because Showtime is included. Because if Showtime is included, they have to be a certain price point in order to not jeopardize their deals with the existing deals they have with cable companies who are offering Showtime, and that becomes a problem. So as a add-on, it becomes in some ways not a conversation issue when it comes to the cable companies. But I think it was an interesting point that internationally the Showtime originals will premiere on the service, because that means they won't be licensing the Showtime originals elsewhere unless, of course, they're already licensed somewhere. They brought up specifically Billions, which is licensed elsewhere. That one won't end, they'll honor their existing licensing deals. Shameless is a very popular series, which is actually ending in the next season, but that series has been very popular and is consistently one of the top shows on Netflix, not top 10, but is a very popular show on Netflix, despite the fact that it is a Showtime original. So I think it's unique in the sense of offering this that premium content internationally to make sure that international audiences are seeing that content, but not having to necessarily charge as much as here in the United States for that same exact content. All right, so then the other CBS All Access news is that they are developing a remote workplace comedy from two of the Office executive producers. This is an obvious thing that someone should have done a while ago. And the closest thing we've gotten is that one episode of Mythic Quest from Apple TV. And I think this is a smart idea.
I mean, there's been another, Mythic Quest. That was fun. Parks and Rec came back they did a one-off special work from home, remote workplace thing at 30 Rock. I didn't watch it, so I can't attest to how they did the format, but they definitely came back as a special episode, and I'm pretty sure it was this remote idea. I think that this is very smart. Once the pandemic hit, I didn't think I brought it on the show, but I definitely brought it off this just private conversation, just pointing off of like what are things that studios can do. And I didn't predict this, but I was talking about like animation, because animation I feel like is one of those things that you can collaborate And you don't have to be necessarily in the same place, because oftentimes you have creative teams that are working in one area that might have a mock-up of the animation, but then the animation is actually like truly designed in a different place and maybe in a different country. Sometimes I was thinking like animation is maybe one of those areas that we might see more adult animation shows, because of how popular they are and how you can do those remote. But then after seeing the success of the Mythic Quest and how hearing interviews of the creative team and actors and how they were able to do it, seeing other shows adopting a similar format, Parks and Rec coming back for a special episode, having 30 Rock come back for an episode, it really shows that this is a possible thing. With Quibi also moving, I just talked about Quibi a while. But Quibi had to reshoot some of their, not really reshoot, sorry. They had to finish out some of their shows by filming it in a different format due to COVID-19. And there's probably a lot more innovation in the space of like, how can we do shows where we can't have everybody on set at one time, but we can film stuff at different locations and then bring that all together to make a beautiful piece. And I think like a workplace comedy right now is kind of like the perfect idea, because I'm working from home. I know, Dustin, you've always worked from home, but I was in the office all the way up until like the first or second week in March, or then all of a sudden like no one's in the office. I know people with COVID-19 at my office place now, and so it's we're all working from home. We're all like Google Meets, Zooms, Hangouts, go to different meetups that are all just virtual. And I feel like that this is kind of like a good piece of comedy that's also appropriate for the time. And I think that sometimes it's important to laugh at the current situation because of how maybe absurd it is or how kind of stressful it might be. And so I feel like this could offer people a way to just relax, because it's like, hey, remember that funny situation at work? Oh yeah, like it's a funny miscommunication that happens when you're on a video chat, or you're accidentally in two video chats and something crazy happens, or you're the Supreme Court and then for some reason you hear a bathroom flush, and that was pretty embarrassing too. So there's all those like different types of stories that I feel like are very apt that a lot of America is dealing with at the same time. And I think that's in America, but the world as well, as dealing with at the same time. So I feel like this is kind of like a really cool experiment, and I'm really excited to see how this is going to work. But it's by the Office producers. It's about a workplace comedy that's people working from remote. I'm definitely all in, and I'm really excited about this project.
All right, so Apple TV Plus, Adam Perlman and Team Downey have gotten a series order for a drama at the service. And while we won't talk at length about this, some breaking news that happened earlier today but didn't make it into our show notes is that Martin Scorsese's production company has actually signed an exclusive deal with Apple TV Plus for movies and television series. So Martin Scorsese, who obviously did The Irishman over at Netflix, but we'll have more details on that next episode. Disney Plus has announced their subscriber numbers have soared to 60.5 million. Now, this is in fact the number of subscribers that this is very close to what they were hoping for within 5 years of the service. And it begs the question. Now, I don't want to paint this in a negative light. Those numbers are, in fact, amazing. As of the end of June, they had 57.5 million. That was the end of the quarter. And as of the beginning of August, when they were doing this on August 4th, they specifically announced that they were up to 60.5. However, this is where I guess I put on my negative hat and say, well, there's just one catch, however, and that's back in May when they gave their numbers, they said that back on May 4th, they were sitting at 54.5 million subscribers. That was within a very short time frame of when they were launching in India. And on top of that, when you do the math, that means from the beginning of May to the end of June, they only gained 3 million subscribers. That also means from the end of June till early August, they gained 3 million subscribers. So that means Hamilton was in fact a massive success for them because they gained 3 million subscribers in just under a month. However, it does mean that the 2 months prior to Hamilton, they only gained 3 million subscribers, even though they were launching in new markets. So the question, of course, is why is it that Hamilton ended up on the service? Was obviously to get a boost because their growth was not doing as well as they hoped because they weren't. I mean, put in perspective, they had 1.5 million subscribers in May, 1.5 million subscribers in June, if you just average it out. And then what happens a couple days after that? They release Hamilton, and they get they basically double their subscriber count in a very similar amount of time. So I think props to Hamilton. I mean, no question about it. It was very successful for the service. But I think the biggest question here is, how is Disney Plus going to continue to gain subscribers? Because not every single month can they have a project like Hamilton. Obviously, they're in a pickle right now just because of the situation with the pandemic and production halts and that kind of stuff. And that's preventing them from getting more premium content created. We know The Mandalorian is safe. That's coming roughly in October. But we know that the Falcon Winter Soldier series is currently, which was supposed to be coming here in the next couple of weeks, is postponed because of production halts. There's other series like the WandaVision series that is also been put on hold. And then obviously there's a bunch of other stuff that, just trickles down as it's held back because of everything that's going on. So the question is, how can they keep growing? Because 5 million, they had to have a significant idea of how many subscribers they could have within 5 years. And the fact that they thought that they could have, roughly 60 million subscribers in 5 years, those are great numbers. However, how does the service continue to grow from here without more and more premium content? And we don't even have any more premium content immediately in the near future. I just don't know that Disney can continue their growth rate, even though everybody sees that flashy number and says, "Ooh boy, they're doing a great job over at Disney." And while I am actually a Disney fan through and through, and I have no problem admitting that, I head to Disney World every year, except for this year because of obvious reasons. I head there. Last year I went to Disneyland. I'm a huge Disney fan, but at the same time, you cannot sit here and ignore the one thing that they've got going for them is the growth of Disney Plus at the company right now. But the service itself seems to be slightly plateauing despite its launching in multiple new markets.
Dustin, I think you're rubbing some of that Quibi hate sauce on Disney, and I feel like you're just being rude. No, I'm saying that with a smile. I think you'd be a perfect data analyst because you're asking great questions. Those are great questions, and those are very valid concerns. And I'm just messing around about being negative. No, I mean obviously growth is growth, and that is important to celebrate. And I'm surprised they've gotten to 60.5 million global subscribers just within less than a year. I mean, that's so impressive for a streaming service that basically has offered nothing except child videos, and because of just a lot of children's content, and then a lot of nostalgia and a lot of just rebranding stuff that's from different services all into its one unique platform. Like you got all the Star Wars movies at one place, all Marvel content at one place, and so I think that's kind of what they've done as they leverage their brand so far. So I think it's amazing that they've gotten to this point of basically being one of the top 4 streaming services. Definitely domestically and then also internationally as well. They're in that conversation. So I think that's great. And I don't want to take away from that. But you do raise some valid concerns of their growth. But I am a little bit less. My concerns are basically I will be concerned when they start plateauing or when they start really losing subscribers. Because I feel like right now, yes, Hamilton was obviously they moved up their release date from sometime next year to basically, hey, we're releasing Hamilton next month. And that caused a huge stir. That caused a huge boom in growth. They've gotten free. Now I say free because it's just people were already going to subscribe, internationally, just because when you open up pool for access, like people are going to automatically join. So you don't know necessarily how much, but certain people were always going to join. And so when they enter to different new markets, it just makes sense of that free, I guess, growth per se. But the 6 million makes sense. But yes, their growth has decreased steadily ever since pretty much the Mandalorian was the last episode of that. It's kind of been on a slow plateau, a growth here and there, but it's still moving on forward. For me, what I would be concerned about for Disney Plus is when they start losing subscribers. I feel like Disney Plus has, in comparison to other streaming platforms, what sets it apart is it might have a limited library, and it's going to even be more limited as it is suffering from the production halts that COVID-19 has kind of implemented to the whole industry. What it has more than maybe Apple TV Plus or some of these other players is a huge back catalog of nostalgia and a huge catalog of like children's content. My child watches a whole bunch of Disney Plus content because it's either that or going to be YouTube. of like Peppa Pig or Blippi or something ridiculous. Like that's what Disney Plus has going for it over some of its other competitors who've released in a similar time span. So kind of with that, the evergreen, children's content that's going to be played, they're going to have subscribers for a while. So it's can they keep those subscribers, and then can they build off the top of that? I would be more concerned when they start losing subscribers, given kind of where the global economy is right now. I don't see it's when people are like, yeah, they need to have like multiplicative growth. All of a sudden, it's like at a certain point that's not going to be possible. And I feel like for Disney Plus, it's reaching that point of like you're not going to see different multiples of growth happening. It's going to be maybe a few percentage points, but up until now, until the end of the year, as long as they don't lose subscribers, that is to me a huge win. Until they get to The Mandalorian season 2, as long as they don't lose any subscribers, then I feel pretty healthy about having Disney Plus as an investment of some sort. If I was an investor or a stakeholder or an analyst, I would feel pretty good about Disney Plus as long as they don't lose subscribers, just given the fact of like they have this huge content library that's like keeping them afloat during this time, just keeping them steady. They're trying. They wanted great new content, but they're just kind of stuck right now in the weird cycle. So that's kind of where they are. I've been really impressed with their international expansions, how they've been able to roll out to different areas with seemingly no major hiccups, and they're keeping on that international push. So that's been really nice as well to see. And their push with India and going with Star has been seemingly successful so far. And so just having them push internationally as well has been nice to see.
All right, and then the other big news from Disney's earnings call is that Mulan, which was the first film that Disney had to hold back, they are actually going to be releasing it on Disney Plus. However, unlike some of the other films out there, it will cost you. So the catch, of course, is that one, you have to be a Disney Plus subscriber. You can't watch it if you're not a Disney Plus subscriber. So they're not going the route of like a paid video on demand service like, any of the services that you could purchase films from, like we've seen with Trolls or Scoob. This film, you will need to have your account. You will need to have a Disney Plus account. And in addition to the Disney Plus account, you will then have to pay $30 on top of that just to be able to view it. And my understanding, at first it was a little convoluted as how this actually was going to work, but the film itself will end up on Disney Plus 6 months after it premieres on the service for that price. So you'll have a consistent access to that $30 film until it's on the service for good. However, as far as I know, and as far as anything I've read up to this point, that purchase does not get you that film anywhere else. So you basically are renting it for 6 months until it ends up on the service where it's available for everybody for free. Well, not free, but for the cost of the subscription. Personally, the entire entertainment industry is a little split on this. They're either saying this is really smart because it doesn't just give away it also gives them the opportunity to bring in some money because this movie did cost them a lot of money to make. And then the other side of it is, holy crap, that's really expensive, and you're not even getting to actually own the film like you could with some of these other paid video on demand options that have been out there. Personally, I think it's a little expensive. I think it's a little ridiculous that you have to be a Disney Plus subscriber, but I understand the idea of making their service an exclusive. It gives them the ability to, I guess, potentially get a couple more subscribers, but the people would also then have to be paying $30 on top of it. I think this is not a great idea. I don't like this idea. I mean, if it's one thing to go paid video on demand and charge more than other films are charging, by all means, I could see that. Disney already, they charge more generally for their films when they release. They don't undercut their films because of the quality that they produce. However, I just don't think that this is a good idea unless, of course, Disney Plus is going to somehow be able to be a service that you could also watch all the other Disney movies that you currently own digitally, because if it's not, then what is the point of this? It just feels like a money grab, in my opinion. That's my take.
Well, I mean, one, it is a money grab. I don't see how it's not. I mean, it definitely is. You bring up an interesting point of like, what if it could maybe integrate with like Movies Anywhere that Disney also owns, where you buy it right now, but then you can also get it at Movies Anywhere in your kind of account later down the road. I think that's an interesting integration that maybe might happen. Who really knows? I get both sides. I get how it is, true money grab, like how dare Disney, Disney is just, money hungry, blah, 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 blah. Or the fact of like, it is a novel way to get the movie out right now. Disney recognizes that theaters are not going to be where they need to be to get those old school like big box office numbers. It's just in the United States, it's just not going to happen. Which for big blockbuster movies, the domestic market, the U.S. domestic market is about a half to a third of all of the global box office revenue of some of these big box office movies that have come out recently. So I get both sides. I feel when I break it down this way of okay, you can watch it for 6 months. It's going to be on Disney Plus before it is released on the service as a whole. You pay $30 to watch it. You're essentially paying, you're double paying a subscriber fee, right? If Disney Plus is $6.99 a month, right? $30 divided by 6 months is $5 a month as well. And you're, basically paying twice a double subscription fee for 6 months to watch that movie at conceivably any time that you want. To me, that cost, that breaking down the cost like per month makes it a little bit better. Like $5 per month, I have the option to watch Mulan during the 6 month span. Now, most people might watch a movie once or twice as it just comes out in a theater, but they won't touch it again. So kind of bringing it down monthly might not make that much sense in that point of view. But I don't know, looking at it that way, paying an extra $5 a month to have the opportunity for those 6 months to watch it, it's a little bit more palatable, in my opinion. I think Disney just saw the boost in subscribers from Hamilton, and I'm curious that maybe they're just running an experiment of like, we're going to get our investment on Mulan some way, somehow. Overseas, the COVID situation is a little bit different. Countries are starting to open up back more. Life is starting to return to normal. So they probably are able to get a lot of their like true investment back from, overseas, box office revenue. And depending on how happy China is with Mulan, and that's a totally different discussion for a totally different show. But, if the China market is happy with Mulan, then maybe that can be a significant amount of the global box office that Disney reaps from the Mulan movie. And, they can say that, it might not have garnered as much money as like releasing it maybe last year when things were going really good for movies. It's not going to make that much of a profit, but it's at least a positive, it paid for itself at the end of the day with the global box office numbers. I think that's kind of an interesting way to go. I'm curious how it's going to end up. I'm curious maybe at the end of Q3 or maybe Q4 when they do the numbers of like how much money Mulan actually made and how much of a success it was moving it this way. But after seeing the success of Hamilton, maybe they're trying a different strategy of like, okay, like we released it on the service, but now we're going to have an upcharge for it. Well, do subscribers like that idea? Do consumers like that idea? Do analysts like that idea? And if, kind of the market plays out and it works, then Disney will be considered a hero. But if not, then, Disney basically you will have early access. They will have released it early access to a certain amount of people for 6 months, and then they would have released it to the general audience anyway. So, I guess I applaud Disney just for experimenting and for taking a risk. I've been surprised though with the lack of blowback it seems that theaters are having to this Mulan deal. We've seen like AMC and Universal been duking it back and forth. And I remember when this came out of like Mulan's going straight to Disney Plus, like, man, I bet Universal's kicking themselves for making that deal with AMC. And I'm curious what AMC's response has been to, Mulan. And maybe you can speak to this, but I have not seen anything around AMC kind of like denouncing Disney for making this move. And that's been a little bit surprising given like the Universal situation. I guess that's kind of like my point of view. I'm just mixed. Like, will I see the movie and spend $30? Yes. But I just applaud them for trying to find a way out of this kind of crummy situation that is COVID-19 of like, you can't get your normal returns on revenues from like theaters because lots of them are closed and they're trying to make a profit on the film. And it's if you make it a big budget box office film and you want to make a return on investment in 2020, that's going to be really, really hard. And I appreciate Disney for at least trying something new, even if it's going to get them some negative press.
I'll say this. I've seen theaters not so happy about this. I've seen some theaters make some comments about how they're not super thrilled with the idea that this is happening. But I think the problem is that anytime a theater at this point speaks about how oh, this is a really bad idea. This is a really bad idea. Of course, that's them and their best interest that they're speaking about, because if the film doesn't premiere in theaters, they don't have any way of making money. And that's the biggest problem for them. However, I think most of the media is looking at it when the theater companies say this, and they've figured it out. They've realized, hey, you know what? They're really just talking about what's best for them, and they're not necessarily thinking about what's best for the studios as well. And that's the problem. The studios, they're the ones who are actually footing the bill for these projects, and they're the ones who are on the hook for the bill for the projects. The theaters, sure, they're missing out on making money. I mean, all the theaters, as a whole, are doing horribly right now. There's theaters closing all over the place that probably won't permanently will not return just because of everything that's going on. And it sucks, but the reality is that it's the studios who are paying for these projects to be made. They're the ones who are going to have to still pay and lose the money if the film doesn't release in some way or get some sort of profit back. So I can see the perspective of, yes, Disney. I applaud Disney also for trying something. I personally think $30 is a little too much money. I don't even know, I had every intention of seeing Black Widow if it came out, but I don't know that I would want to pay $30 for Black Widow either if it was the exact same situation. Could I see a lot of people paying $30 for Frozen 2 if it was in a similar situation? Definitely, I could see that. I could see them actually charging more than $30 and people paying it because of a similar situation, because of the rewatchability that plenty of people. I mean, my daughter has watched Frozen 2 on Disney Plus more times than I can count on all of my fingers and toes. I mean, it's just, that's the way it goes. So I can see that. But the Mulan film is not a film that I could see a lot of people rewatching over and over and over again. It's just, and it's nothing against the movie itself. It's just, it's not that type of animated movie where it appeals to a wide variety of children. It's a film that will appeal to a large audience, but I don't think it's going to appeal to the same type of audience that some of these other animated projects that Disney, deals with on a normal basis and has a great amount of success. I think Mulan, if it came out in theaters, it could have done extremely well. I'm sure it would have, but unfortunately, they're getting to a point where they've got to start getting some money for some of these projects, and I understand that. But at the same time, I think $30 is just a little too much for the current situation.
I will agree. I will agree with that. I mean, I just did the numbers real quick, and it's like, out of their 60 million, global subscribers, let's assume that 1/10, pays this $30 price. Even 1/10 of the subscriber audience would make 180 million. And I just Googled from beforehand, the Mulan box office is, reported at 200, but you got marketing, so maybe 220, 230. They would make a significant, recoup on their investment, just even with 1/10 of the audience spending $30. I get how they got to the $30 number. Just doing percentages and fudging, it makes sense. But I feel realistically, if you want people to, watch this content, but you want to do paid video on demand, I would make it kind of how much you would spend in a movie theater. And, movie theater ticket prices are 10, well, not really 10. You have to go to super matinee then, but 10 to 15, $10 to $20. I would feel a lot more better about it being in that range than I would be, $30. I feel with $30, you need to be able to, at least have the option to have it saved in your Movies Anywhere account as well when it is released. I feel that would be a heck of a deal and a great integration as well. But sadly, that's not the case.
All right, so let's move over to our great friends Quibi. Quibi is launching in Australia and New Zealand with a free ad-supported model. I could have swore that at some point we talked about how this should have happened in the U.S. I'm just going to
stay positive. Stay positive.
I'm going to briefly talk about this for a second because we've talked about this before. When Quibi launched, I mentioned that there should have been a free ad-supported model. That's what they should have figured out some way of making that work. And clearly they're going outside of the country and they're going to try this free ad-supported model elsewhere to see if it does work. However, it is a problem for the U.S. subscribers where the service launched initially because they're not going to offer a free ad-supported model at this point in time for the U.S. or for the foreseeable future unless it's extremely profitable with the ads alone because they already have people paying, and if people have the option of watching more ads and not having to pay, unless the number of ads and the money that they're bringing in from the ads completely outweighs the amount of money that they're bringing in from subscriptions, it's not beneficial for them to even offer this. So it's unfortunate that they've realized the error of their ways this late in the game. So America is kind of, out of luck when it comes to this specific situation. But at least as this service rolls out in other countries, they'll have the ability to kind of have the fruits of our labor when it comes to seeing what went wrong with Quibi and how they can make it better when it comes to other countries. So at least there's that. All right, HBO Max. There's a One Perfect Shot docuseries that has been announced for HBO Max, with Ava DuVernay being the narrator for the series. WarnerMedia has undergone a major restructuring as HBO Max has become a major priority. Specifically, Bob Greenblatt and Kevin Riley, who have both been at the very forefront of HBO Max, they're out. And the current CEO of WarnerMedia, who was just put in place announced in April, took over in the beginning of May, and has only really been in the job for about 90 days. He's basically cleaning house, and we're going to specifically talk about the situation that comes when it comes to HBO Max, but this is all down the line of WarnerMedia. This is, not just HBO. But this isn't just WarnerMedia as a company, it's everything below it. So there's people within HBO who are losing their jobs. There's people who are within Turner Networks is losing their jobs. There's people at DC Comics that are losing their jobs. There's a lot of people who are losing their jobs because of the massive restructuring that they want to streamline things to make this HBO Max their number one priority.
It was a rough weekend. I mean, this report of Bob Greenblatt and Kevin Riley out, this was on August 7th, which was a Friday, and then there's just even more news. The Hollywood Reporter is again reporting more shakeups, and this was a lot of creative people found out the news on Monday, and it was Sunday night. Monday. It was a crazy week. If you were at WarnerMedia or one of the sub companies under WarnerMedia, it was a rough week. I mean, I understand the push for new leadership. I understand the push for new ideas. I understand the push for rebranding your whole entire company and pivoting forward to a new platform, a new idea. But it's still rough to see a lot of people lose their jobs. It was just sad. I mean, I understand market forces push for efficiency and push for a better product and a better content. And there are definitely arguments to be made that a lot of these sub companies under the structure we're not producing at peak efficiency for many different reasons. But it was a rough weekend to be a part of the WarnerMedia umbrella of companies. It was just a lot happened. Yeah, and something else that was, there's a lot of shakeup plans, and that's obviously sad. But to move on more, I guess, a little bit less personnel decisions was that, Jason Kilar, like you just said, just came in. He made it, HBO Max is the future of WarnerMedia. And the umbrella of companies, that is the platform to push forward. It's to reach as much as possible with HBO Max. So everything is being made to funnel content through HBO Max and then to the rest of the world. So this could be from, studios inside developing content. It was really interesting how over the past, really the life cycle of Warner Brothers, before it came under AT&T and WarnerMedia and all that stuff, Time Warner. It's just for the longest time, they've developed content for other people to put on the platform to distribute. That's kind of been one of the staples of what they've done in the ranging different licensing deals and stuff like that over time. But Kilar's really put a push of we're stopping those deals. Projects are not being made for our competitors. Projects are not made for other people in the streaming space. Any project is going to be funneled through HBO Max. Everything is to prop up HBO Max. I mean, even DC Comics, they've had a rough weekend of just layoffs, but it seems that instead of DC Comics being a comics company, it's really a way to create IP that could be leveraged and developed for WarnerMedia to then produce. So it's really all about piping that funnel of all content coming through HBO Max and not have it leave to other partners in the space or other competitors. So that was kind of interesting to see that big change and shift in WarnerMedia business, and I'm curious in the long term how that's going to be, because we talk a lot about subscriber numbers, and we just had a whole thing on Disney Plus and their subscriber numbers, but there's a lot of other deals that happen that bring in a lot of cash, that bring in a lot of revenue. And, some of those are these licensing deals that don't get enough credit just in the news. And I'm curious over the long term, like will there be any budget shortfalls due to, a change in licensing revenue, and then will HBO Max, cover that growth? Like, as the licensing deal expires, will HBO Max have grown to the point to offset, said loss in contracts, said loss in licensing revenue? So that to me is the curious of like long-term value of this change is seeing those effects down the road. Now we won't see those maybe within a quarter or two. Those are going to be, longer down the road, but that is kind of like a huge change of business revenue of like, okay, we're not licensing content out as much. It's all in-house, and it's really going to be a push for HBO Max to grow their subscriber base, to push internationally, to push even more and convert, those who, casually use the service or use a different part of HBO to really use HBO Max.
Agreed. And I think the biggest thing for HBO Max is they want to be a company, or they want to be a service like Disney Plus, in the sense of, in order to grow, you have to have control of your content. Sure, licensing deals are great. There was a lot of talk initially when Disney Plus was about to launch about how much money Disney Plus was actually going to lose from their licensing agreements that they had in place with Netflix, because they were making a good chunk of money from their Netflix deal, that the films were immediately going over to Netflix. They had deals in place with Stars, and they needed to get the rights back to that stuff, and they needed to stop taking that money, that easy money, because it was existing money, and they needed to start figuring out a way to contain their content within one service in order to make sure that they can make more direct money and control the content for their viewers. And that's the thing. HBO Max, they're trying to do the same thing, but they're so much more spread out when it comes to licensing agreements that it's going to be very, very difficult. We've heard in the last couple of weeks the major focus with HBO Max going internationally, launching in these international markets. If you went back to almost a year ago, that was not a focus at the company. They were not focused on getting into these other markets very quickly. And the reason why was because they have an enormous problem of basically walking the minefield of these licensing deals with so many different services outside of the country. There's so many different companies that they've licensed the content to outside of the United States that it's very difficult. So now they've realized, hey, look at Disney Plus as an example. Not necessarily that they're doing this, but look at Disney Plus. They're launching in multiple international markets in a very short amount of time. And the big takeaway from that is the content that Disney Plus has when they're launching these markets is very similar from market to market. There's not a huge difference in the amount of content they have. So it's very important for them to, as a company, WarnerMedia needs to try to get a hold on their content so that they can go to these new markets, get large subscriber base, and continue to offset those licensing things as time progresses. Because we all know, and we've talked about, and the media talks about how, when you have a company that's very successful in what you do, it's very difficult to change. Killard comes across as the type of person who is coming in and seeing, hey, I understand that the company has made an insane amount of money off of licensing stuff, but we can make more money if we do this. And yeah, we're going to take a hit on this initially, but we're going to take a hit on not getting the licensing money, but this is going to be better for us overall long term in both domestic and international markets. And I think that's what this is all coming down to, is like there's a huge culture change when it comes to how to go about getting money for the company and how to be successful. HBO Max has been touted as the future of WarnerMedia and the future of AT&T, and very important to their business model. Now it actually seems like it is extremely important because of what's going on. Unfortunately, it just means that a lot of people are losing their jobs because of how they're restructuring things to make it more streamlined. But that is how it is actually coming, what it actually is coming down to. All right, so jumping over to Peacock, the Harry Potter films, which we talked about, were leaving HBO Max at the end of August or close to the end of August. They're actually going to end up on Peacock. They're going to be calling Peacock home for the foreseeable future. They're going to end up on Peacock, I believe, in October, which is not a surprise considering NBC Universal licensed the Harry Potter films, and we know that there was a last-minute deal to get the Harry Potter films on the service of HBO Max when it first launched. Clearly, the time has come for the Harry Potter films to go back to the current license holder. The Rich Eisen Show has become a Peacock exclusive series. This is an NBC sports talk show that will be on there. There's also some more sports things that we'll talk about in the next episode related to Peacock. There's been some more exclusive deals with sports shows, sports talk shows, that is, coming exclusively to Peacock. Jumping over to niche streaming services, Discovery. I'm going to quickly talk about this. I wrote this headline. This is not the headline that Deadline put, but the Deadline headline was Discovery getting closer to their direct-to-consumer service, and the CEO calls it the SUV of brands, characters versus sports cars like Netflix, Amazon, and Disney. Personally, I rewrote this headline to say Discovery continues to tout upcoming service without any real updates, because that's what it feels like. I feel like this is the third quarter in a row that Discovery has sat there and said, hey, we've got this awesome service, we are going to launch it, but they haven't talked about pricing, they haven't talked about an actual launch date, they haven't talked about what's actually going to be included. There's never any new details when it comes to this, and it seems like the only time we ever hear about it is when there's a quarterly earnings, when people are actually like, hey, so when's this coming? And they're like, oh, it's coming. It's definitely coming, and it's gonna be awesome. And I'm waiting for some actual details. I'd really like to get some actual details on that. As far as AMC Networks, they've announced that their niche streaming services, specifically Shudder and Acorn TV, among others, they are thriving over at AMC, but that presents its own set of problems.
I don't like the word thriving there. Looking over the numbers, it's they forecast between 3.5 million to 4 million paid subscribers between the four streamers. So they're four little sub streaming things that they got going on. That is like nothing. I mean, I'm not trying to be super negative here. It's just the fact of when you compare us into the big dogs, this is a proof of concept. I have a feeling like even DC Universe has more subscribers than this. So this is great that they found a niche audience, that they're supplying a need for some people. But I mean, even the article points out that it's a niche service, so they don't have to build out a crazy large, content library to reach the masses, to always keep them entertained, to make sure that they're fighting for people's attention. They're not doing what Netflix is doing. They're serving a niche for a certain amount of people who just like horror or other random things that are going on. So I mean, yeah, they are getting stable revenue, but stable that's even a word. Stable revenue from 3.5 to 4 million paid subscribers is not that much at the end of the day. So I appreciate AMC Networks, they're trying, and that's really cool that they're pushing for that. But at the same time, it's just chump change in comparison to the rest of the money that could be gotten for streaming. So yeah, it's a little bit of a recurring cash pot that's going on. They do have to invest every now and then for maybe some new properties, licensing that's content out, but it's just more of a stable investment. But it's not really earning them lots of money. It's not like AMC Networks is also going to move into streaming or something. So it's not really news, but it somehow is, I guess.
All right, and then moving over to other streaming providers, a couple of things. First off, Disney has decided to forget about Hulu's international plans, and they are going to be moving forward with a Star-branded service for international markets. Now, this specifically comes off the heels of the launch of Disney Plus attached to Hotstar, but the service will be called Star. One would assume that it's a very similar service to Hotstar, just called Star, but there's not a whole lot of details here, except for it will include content from ABC, FX, and Fox. that they already have, and then but it does put into question of, well, what's the plans for Hulu, because we've heard up until this point that Hulu had every intention to launch internationally, and for some reason there's been multiple hiccups because it hasn't happened. It was actually planned, I believe, for this year, and then they pushed it back to next year, and now they're talking about creating a whole nother streaming service that they can specifically roll out with all of the content that is already available on Hulu. So it is one of those things where the question is, what was the change? Maybe they realized that Hulu wasn't meant well for international markets. I'm not sure. I mean, like, my guess is that when it comes to Hulu, it's so closely related to television and in America that they didn't think maybe it was going to work internationally. So they figured, why not just start a new service that can include the same content?
I have to agree. I feel just talking to different people internationally on different, forums or websites and stuff like that. It feels like, either, the Canadian, the US, Canadian, and then, parts of like UK, the European market know what Hulu is, and then either watch it through various means. But it doesn't seem like after this whole entire time that Hulu's been a service just has struggled to gain and to garner, international interest. And it's really focused on domestic growth. And that's fine. I mean, I feel from a efficiency standpoint, it might not be the most efficient thing to roll a whole different service that basically is kind of like a copy of the Hulu service. But I do understand from a brand awareness standpoint of Hulu might just be too attached with the US market. It's going to struggle to get, anywhere, overseas. With Hotstar being a big thing in India, taking the Star idea, just, I don't know. The more I think about it, the more it's starting to gel, the more it's starting to make sense. But making another service to solve Hulu's woes, I don't know, might not be the best thing. But maybe they have a different plan for Hulu in their future, or maybe they're trying to roll in content from Hulu into Disney Plus. I mean, who really knows what's going on there? But this is one of the more surprising moves of this week, and definitely we should keep an eye on this because they were really pushing like for Disney Plus, their international numbers to grow Disney Plus's growth, and Hulu has had some growth, some modest growth, but I mean they're really just finding more domestic players. They're not fighting outside, and they're not getting any international leverage and opportunities. They're fighting even themselves, even Disney Plus as a service, to get the subscriber dollars from the U.S. domestic market. So definitely one of the more surprising moves of this week.
Right, and then the other big news, Roku has said that they have grown to 43 million active accounts, which when we were talking about this ahead of time, you brought up a very specific reason as to the importance of this.
Yes, this is all the reason why HBO Max and HBO, WarnerMedia, whatever, should get a deal with Roku. Like, they have 43 million active accounts, and with surprisingly decent verbiage from a U.S. congressional hearing. Like, they said this about Amazon, but I like it about Roku. Like, they are the gatekeepers of streaming services. Like, Roku is that gatekeeper. They have 43 million active accounts. Like, people use that to watch a bunch of long form content. Like, it I don't know, just as somebody who even has a Roku, just it doesn't make sense why HBO or WarnerMedia hasn't gotten a deal with HBO Max. So it's disappointing, it's frustrating. I'm upset at both parties, but it just shows how much that they need Roku, because Roku is that doorway to a whole bunch of households. Like if you want to push HBO Max's growth, like you need to ride a little bit on that Roku train. So it's a little bit frustrating, but I'm hoping for a deal sometime soon.
Yeah, and the one other thing, when I want to go back to Jason Kilar for a second. When he was doing the rounds, I believe he did an interview with Variety where they specifically said, so based off of everything going on, do you see a deal with Amazon in the near future? And he specifically kind of called out Amazon in a way and said, well, let's just put it this way. We're approaching the holiday season, and if Amazon or Roku don't have devices that allow every service out there to be used, people could consider going and purchasing a different type of equipment to stream, specifically if they're in the market for a new device to be able to connect to all these streaming services. And again, I don't disagree with that statement. The problem is there's not really anything out there. I mean, we've heard talk about this Google one that has yet to be announced, even though we've heard rumors about it for what feels like months. And
but any other non-Roku or Amazon, smart TV operating system thing is maybe the Chromecast, but even then that's a very limited capacity, or it's like some native OS thing that's in your TV. Like there's no other third-party hardware accessory that you can get to implement, these other streaming services. And that's frustrating for me just because there is no alternative, really.
And the thing is, maybe it's the perfect storm for Google to finally announce this new device that will allow, because Google has deals in place with every streaming service. There's nobody out there that they don't have a deal with. So it's just a matter of them pulling the trigger and actually saying, let's announce this thing. And I for one am looking forward to that, because I think the only one that they don't have a deal with is Apple TV for obvious reasons. Outside of that, they have deals in place with every other streaming service that's out there. So it presents a unique situation where Peacock and HBO Max will be accessible on a device that isn't available, that could be mainstream as Roku or Amazon Fire devices. So, all right, so we don't have a main discussion because obviously as you're looking at your clock, you're probably thinking, wow, this episode is really long, because there was a lot of news, and I mentioned that earlier. But I do want to briefly bring up a tweet that was sent out by Julia Alexander. She's a reporter over at The Verge. She sent out a tweet that said global box office revenue in 2019 was $42.5 billion. By studio, Disney made up 13.2 of that, Warner Brothers made up 4.4, and Universal made up 3.7. Those studios alone added up to $21.3 billion. 50% of all global box office revenue was from those three studios. Studios conglomerate owners push streaming services. Can't ban them, they have to work with them. And therein lies the reality. The studios want to be in theaters. They also want to be in homes as fast as possible. They want whatever revenue avenue there is. Again, going to digital retailers or directly into their own streaming services means bigger or full percent of profit. What's evidently clear is threats to ban studios, especially the big three that also have streaming service, is childish. You can't ignore Disney / Fox, Warner Brothers, and Universal Movies. Studios want to work it out. They want to be in theaters. But the window, no. So this is related to the streaming window, basically the discussion that we were talking about a couple episodes ago. But it shows, AMC, the idea of them banning Universal films for the foreseeable future, it was never something that was going to actually happen. It just wasn't, because there's no reason that, that Universal makes up a huge chunk of their money. Disney sitting there saying they're going to release Mulan, even if theaters are upset about it, it doesn't matter. Disney brought in $13.2 billion last year of box office money, which makes up basically almost over 1/4 of the entire global box office last year. So you can't ban them. You can't sit there and say we're not going to work with them. You have to adapt to the times. I mean, right now, theaters, as a company, I get that theater owners are sitting there going, this freaking sucks. We have absolutely no way of making money because of everything that's going on. And the people who supply us the opportunity to make money, they're finding other ways of making money. And it sucks. It really does. But it is what we're experiencing across the board in lots of different industries. They're just the one that happens to be feeling it when we talk about it.
I feel like COVID has just been like a massive accelerant on a whole bunch of economic and societal just issues. But I feel like COVID's definitely been an accelerant into the growing, not animosity, because there's no true animosity, but the growing just friction between studios and theater chains. Yeah, they talk about global box office revenue has been increasing the past couple of years, but if you really kind of do the numbers, it's really been top heavy between pretty much action movies, animated, big children's movies, and then like superhero movies. Like it's all about the experiences of like you're taking your kid to the theaters to watch this movie for the first time, or you're going to go watch this crazy action film and you want to have a fun time. But a lot of like the not old school, but a lot of like the other movies that are more intellectually, meant for different crowds, meant for maybe an award or something. Like a lot of those movies, like you can watch them on streaming services now. Like why would I want to go out of my way to watch this very unique movie when I could just stay at home and watch it? But if I'm gonna go watch like a Star Wars or some superhero film, I can have this experience of watching it in the theater on like a crazy cool IMAX screen. So you've had theater chains actually over the past 5 years really adapted their theaters to have a little bit less capacity but bigger seats, or seats that shake due to subs, better food, maybe even ordering food and then having it brought to you during the shows. Like there's been this massive change in theaters for them to still be relevant, to have a place at the table, to still earn money, due to the fact of like just customers are changing how they view going to the theaters. So there's always been this friction, and it's been more evident the past couple of years as superhero movies have been on the rise. And I definitely think that COVID's just kind of been like the final straw of like how tough it is to be a theater chain and to make money. But then as a studios, it's like with the dawn of the internet and pushing more and more stuff there, it's people are less reliant on the theater. I never just understood why AMC threatened Universal, because no one would have believed it. And at the end of the day, like Universal would have been fine. So it's a tough situation for theater chain, in that they're the ones that are going to have to adapt, because studios are gonna set the rule. I mean, we've seen that with Trolls, we've seen that with Mulan. I mean, we're curious to see what's gonna happen with Tenet or Black Widow. Of like, are theaters even going to be open to even allow people to watch, or are they going to do paid video on demand? Or are they just going to release it on the streaming service as is? So it's just I feel like this tweet just sums up a lot of opinions and a lot of things that a lot of people have known for a little bit, but it's just been a little bit hard to swallow, because theaters, like, that's where you make a lot of memories. That's where you watch movies for the first time with it's where you make an experience. So it's just a tough conversation to have, but it's just things are just moving, things are changing, and change is hard sometimes.
Agreed. All right, so that is going to wrap up this episode. There is a number of trailers that have released over the past week for you guys to check out. Check those out in the show notes. The show notes can be found on our website, thestreamingwars.io. You can also follow us on Twitter and join our Discord for all these articles that we talk about here on the podcast and some that we don't. Follow us on Instagram for all the latest announcements related to new episodes of the podcast posting. You can shoot us an email at thestreamingwars@gmail.com with any questions, comments, concerns, or topics you'd like us to talk about on future episodes. And then finally, if you are listening to this podcast, please take a second to leave us a review wherever you are listening to it. We greatly appreciate that. With all of that being said, for Tony and myself, continue to stay safe out there, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to The Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.